Okay, my watch says 3 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get the meeting going. I'd like to call the December 21st, 2020 Water Board meeting to order. Heather, could you please start with a roll call?
Sure. Chair Williams?
Here.
Allison Gould?
Here.
Kathy Peterson?
Here.
Scott Holwick?
Here.
Roger Lang?
Here.
Ken Hewson?
Here.
Nelson Tipton?
Here.
Wes Lowry?
Here.
Kevin Bowden?
Here.
Francie is not here yet. Jason is coming in. Councilmember Martin?
Here.
All right. Chair Williams, you have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, Heather.
Uh-huh.
The item 3 on the agenda is approval of the previous month's minutes, the October 19th, 2020. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the meeting minutes? I don't see any. If there's no comments, does someone want to make a motion for accepting the October 19th, 2020 meeting minutes? Kathy?
Kathy Peterson here. I move that we accept the October 19th, 2020 minutes as submitted.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, sounds like Allison is the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Okay. Next item on the agenda, item 4, is the water status report. Is that Nelson or Wes? Nelson?
Yeah, I'll go ahead, Todd. So the flow of the St. Vrain Creek at Lyons at 8 a.m. today was 9 CFS, and the 124-year average, historic average for this date is 17 CFS. The call on the St. Vrain Creek is Pleasant Valley Reservoir, and the admin number is 7822, and the priority date is 8/1/1871. Call on the main stem of the South Platte River is the Riverside Canal. The admin number is 21031, and the priority date is 8/1/1907. The Ralph Price Reservoir at Button Rock Preserve is currently full and spilling. And due to the scheduled outlet repairs, that's why it's still full for this time of year. And it's anticipated to be completed, the outlet repairs, by March of 2021. And Jason will go over that, I believe, in his project update. So Union Reservoir is currently at 21.3 feet. Full is 28 feet, so it's down approximately 4,500 acre feet, and currently releasing 10 CFS. And Wes is going to touch base, I think, on more of the snowpack, but the current snowpack for the South Platte River Basin is 76% of normal, and then the Upper Colorado snowpack is at 73% of normal. And that completes my report, Todd. Any questions? You're muted. Any questions?
I'm sorry, are there any questions for Nelson? I'm not seeing anybody with their hand up. Okay,
All right,
go ahead and move on. The next item 5, is public invited to be heard in special presentations. And talking to Heather before the meeting, it does not sound like we have any public invited to be heard. Ken, is there any special presentations for today?
Yes, we have Sean Cronin and Jason Rodebush with the St. Vrain and Left Hand Water Conservancy District. I'll let Kevin introduce the item and then let Sean and Jason take over.
Okay, go ahead, guys.
So today we have Sean and Jason here to discuss the progress of the district's efforts on the St. Vrain Left Hand Water Conservancy District Stream Management Plan. For some of you, this is an all new item. But the board last heard an update on this in July of 2017. So I will let Jason take it from here.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, before Sean and Jason kick off, I wanted to disclose for the record, for transparency's sake, that I'm general counsel for the Conservancy District. This is not an action item that we're entertaining here, so I'm not planning to recuse myself from participation, but just wanted people to know and understand. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. So Heather, if you could just note that in the minutes, and with that, I'll turn it over to Sean.
I sure will. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to turn it over to Jason, our newest employee, and then I'll pick up the back end. So Jason, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, you bet. Thank you all. My name is Jason Rodabush. I'm a water resource specialist with the St. Vrain and Left Hand Water Conservancy District. I've been with the district for about 6 months now, and I'm pleased to report that the SMP for both St. Vrain and Left Hand Creeks was completed in October. This project was a phase 1 effort, which took nearly 3 years to complete and was formally accepted by our board of directors on October 12th. Next slide, please. So phase 1 of the stream management plan was made possible with the generous support from the city of Longmont, and we certainly want to thank you for that. This is a list of partners, and as you can see, support really came from a wide range of public, private, and nonprofit entities, all with the common goal of improving our basin. And I think that is fairly unique to this area of Colorado. Next slide. So why did the district take on a stream management plan, and what is it exactly? To answer the what of that question is that this is really a process driven by the CWCB. And it's to engage stakeholders and identify the current and future water needs of the water users in the basin. And then through that stakeholder process and that stakeholder engagement, come a lot of conversations, a lot of actions, and then some strategies for implementing the stream management plan, and then eventual fundraising. Back to the question of why it's important. For our major partners like Longmont, I think it's important to understand how the CWCB builds the state's funding priorities through planning efforts. So if you remember way back, the first water planning efforts, the first that I can remember at least, started with the Basin Implementation Plan, where projects and processes were identified and prioritized for funding. And as a part of that Basin Implementation Plan, the St. Vrain and Left Hand Stream Management Plan was one of those processes. And because it was a major part of that stream management plan, it was eventually funded by the state. And then if, the Basin Implementation Plan was up and rolling for a few years, and that eventually led to the Colorado Water Plan, which resulted in some legislation, the construction fund, and the result of that was bringing millions of dollars to the basin, or to the state, for water projects. And our basin has received some of that. As we keep progressing, most recently, we have the passing of some new legislation, Proposition DD, which is to collect proceeds from gambling. And that's ready to hit this summer and to fund big water projects. So really, as we've worked through the progression within our basin here, I believe that our timing is excellent with the completion of this plan. Our next step is to bring forward projects and other efforts to the state for funding. And, we anticipate a lot of that funding to start hitting in July, depending on, the impacts to the state budget from COVID. But from what we're understanding, that money is going to start to be made available in July for projects. Next slide, please. So this SMP was a big bite compared to some of the other plans in Colorado. And in total, we addressed an entire watershed at about 500 square miles. And underneath that large umbrella, the stakeholders established desired conditions and management goals. And what was different about our basin and this SMP is that in some of the smaller stream management plans, like the Upper Colorado, it really focused on single elements of the basin like trout, the cold water fishery in the upper Colorado. Now, because our basin is more of a working river than, say, the upper Colorado, we took a more holistic approach to tackling the stream management plan. So, for example, a desired condition for water management on the St. Vrain is, and I can quote here, to achieve a balance amongst the needs of the natural environment, non-consumptive and consumptive users. So we really left the door wide open for a number of different projects, from ag to municipal to conservation and wildlife. And then underneath those desired conditions, the water management goal for, say, the infrastructure component at least, and I quote, work with water rights holders to ensure the water supply needs are met and not interrupted, explore issues and concerns, and find opportunities for mutually beneficial management improvements. So we've really taken into account all of the stakeholders in this basin, and we want to move forward holistically with this approach. So stepping off from the established desired conditions and management goals, our consultant completed a stream health evaluation, and then utilized that to determine opportunity areas. And this is really chapter 5, the meat and potatoes of this report, and I'd encourage you to get into it. That data was then used to come up with strategies for implementation. Next slide, please. So if you've had a chance to flip through the report, I'm not sure if you have, you'll notice that there are 4 central areas, focus areas, and that was flows, habitat, water quality, and water management / infrastructure. From chapter 4 of the report on, the report follows this organization. And so as you move on from chapter 4, really the meat and potatoes of the plan, which we don't have a ton of time to get into this afternoon, but I'd be happy to get into some side conversations or to come back for a deeper dive. Slide 6, please. So chapter 6 and 7 of the report present the strategies and potential projects for both near-term and long-term implementation. In the near term, we have a laundry list of specific items to focus on for each of the central themes. And as you can see, flow dominates nearly all of these items outlined here. So it's important that Longmont, have a seat front and center at the table so that we can continue this great partnership and really move into phase 2. We have just a laundry list of items here. Some of these are going to require a deeper dive, with some focus groups. Others, we think we have some projects that are ready to be funded here. So with the next slide, as we start to look to the next steps, I think it's important to take a step back and survey the landscape with regard to partners in this basin. Many areas of Colorado struggle to bring folks to the table for big endeavors, big water projects like this, but that's certainly not the case with our basin. We have highly motivated folks at the county with Trout Unlimited, with Left Hand Watershed Center, and then of course with Longmont, and then the district, and amongst many others. And everybody wants to take control, wants to write grants for implementation, and so we're going to have to be very strategic with how we approach implementation. And there's going to be instances where the district is best suited to lead, and other instances where we have our best fit is in a supporting role. And this is certainly the case with everyone. So I'm excited to use this SMP as a launching point to go fundraise, to bring money to our basin, to really make a difference, and to bring us forward with not only modernization of a lot of our infrastructure, our aging infrastructure in the basin, but to continue that strong legacy of conservation in the St. Vrain and Left Hand. And with that, I'd be happy to answer some questions.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions? And please feel free to speak up. I can't see everybody on the screen at one time here. Jason, I do have, I guess I'll start off with a question. You mentioned in terms of, flow and trying to meet objectives and stream health and management, and flow obviously is key to that. Have you been working with Longmont staff in terms of Button Rock operations, or is that going to be part of a future kind of phase in the project. Just kind of curious how that fits in, given how important that is to the river flows.
Yeah, you bet. So I came in at the 11th hour of this process. I was hired on in July, but I have had some conversations with Longmont staff, and I know that it was a topic of discussion at a lot of the stakeholder meetings. It is touched on in the report, but just mentioned at a high level, that we would look to sit down with Longmont staff and try to develop some reservoir operation scenarios, if you will, that might be able to provide mutual benefit in the basin. And so that it's listed in the report. There aren't a lot of specifics on that, and that was intentional. Sean, do you have anything else you'd elaborate on there?
Yeah, if I could, many on the board are either aware of this or know this, but there was a time where Longmont was very active in making releases, particularly in the wintertime, that provided mutual benefits, and that was through Longmont's leadership. And the state of Colorado, through a variety of different policies and interpretation on decrees and administration, really challenged Longmont's ability to continue to be able to do that, and it hasn't been done for some years. And staff could certainly speak to the specifics around that. I think it was partly a motivating factor in Longmont's participation to really sort of shed a light that the administration of the river oftentimes presents really collaborative, creative, multi-benefit management of water supplies. And so through now the stream management plan having science to demonstrate what the needs of the river might be, we can utilize that to have conversations with the state about how much flexibility we might have in collective management of supplies, not to just shed a light singularly on Longmont, but you could look at a variety of different ways that we manage water supplies across the basin. And at least now we have a state sanctioned report that we could talk to the state and say, something doesn't square here.
Chairperson Williams, if I may. You mentioned some projects that are ready to be funded. Would you mind elaborating on that, please?
Yeah, so I think that there are several areas that have been noted that were not restored after the 2013 flood event. So there are several key areas of stream restoration. There's a lot of aging infrastructure in this basin that could use retrofit, could use replacement, could use upgrading altogether. As it pertains to infrastructure, those are more complex conversations because of the various ownership structures. And so we've already started to have some of those conversations, and Longmont has been a part of those as to how we best tackle these really important issues on the stream moving forward.
And if I could add to that, sometimes projects is used as a term of art with these kind of processes. And so the management conversation on how we collectively as water users manage water supplies, and as I said earlier, creating those multiple benefits could in and of itself be a project, quote unquote. So that's definitely something that's described in the plan as well.
And on the water quality side of things, that it's fairly well established, some of our real problem areas, some of our legacy mines. And so those are ongoing projects that require more funding and require further development. And so they are established at this point.
I've got an additional question. I know, at the last election, you guys were able to get some additional funding source through an increase in the mill levy. How does that play into kind of the future funding of, the projects that you identify as part of the plan? And then I assume maybe that also gives you some leverage with the state on partnering or leveraging some funding to get projects done. Just I don't know if it's been pretty recent since you got that. I don't know if you've given some thought as to how that all comes together.
I'm going to take that, Jason.
Yeah, I think that Sean was going to present on that one a little bit as well. So maybe this is a good turning point.
Yeah, and I could give a little bit of that answer, and then slides will touch on the rest of it. But it is early in the process. It just approved in November. We don't start receiving the money until January, and then periodically throughout the year. So the St. Vrain and Left Hand Water Conservancy District Board of Directors are going through prioritization exercises to identify what opportunities might be out there to best maximize those dollars. Absolutely, matching of grants is one that's going to be a top priority of the board. For every dollar that the taxpayers granted us, if we could leverage that with a dollar from the state, that's just better money spent here. So that'll certainly be in the mix. But the stream management plan, as well as the district's recently approved business plan, will be the lenses at which the board of directors go through that prioritization exercise.
Thanks, Sean. Any other questions? I don't see any other. Sean, you were going to give another?
Yeah, Heather, if
presentation?
you could queue up some other slides, I'd just take a couple more minutes if we have it, just to thank all of you as Longmont residents and voters on your recent approval of what the ballot called 7A. Next slide. So this was put on the ballot as a result of the board of directors recently adopted business plan that was adopted in February 2020. Next slide. So what 7A asked the voters for is a 1.25 mil increase. As of in 2020, our mill was 0.156. So this was a 1.25 mil increase to that, dedicated to what we told the voters is a 5-point plan. That is basically the business plan that the graphic showed you a little bit earlier. That'll, at the time, we believe that to generate about $3.3 million per year. With this year's assessed property values going into 2021, it looks more like 3.4 million with some of the new properties coming online. We also told the voters it would have a 10-year sunset. So what we're looking at in way of implementation timeline is something over the next, or some things over the next 10 years. Next slide, please. So this was really a collaborative effort in working cooperatively with a variety of different partners and stakeholders. This is just all the logos of the folks that actually publicly endorsed 7A. And you'll see here quite a diversity in agricultural, nonprofit, commercial and enterprise folks, all from this area and state and national organizations. Next slide, please. There was also a great deal of folks who were aware of the 5-point plan and the business plan and the ballot question, and for a variety of reasons didn't necessarily publicly endorse it, but were aware of what we were doing and providing feedback through the whole process. Next slide, please. So the voters approved it nearly 70%, 67.81% to be exact. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? Next slide, please. Just go ahead and Heather, if you could click through real quick. And that's it there. So the 5-point action plan is watershed protection and water security, improve our water IQ, strengthen agriculture, creek improvement facilities, and improve conservation. And what the business plan talks about is there's programs, projects, and services within each of those 5 categories or 5 points. So on the slide, it's a little difficult to see, but underneath each of those 5 points within the color shaded box are programs, projects, and services. And some may be of interest to you, but due to time, we can't go into that. So we do have information online that you can read on our website, or as Jason alluded to earlier, we're happy to come back and do a deeper dive if the board chose. But we're really excited about all of these programs, projects, and services. And as I mentioned earlier, the board is now going through a prioritization exercise to determine how to most efficiently start utilizing the 3.4 million this year, the 3 point whatever next year, and so on and so forth. And collectively over that 10-year period, really have what I call a net positive impact to the basin with multi-use approaches. You'll see in here stream management plan implementation, you'll see in-stream flows, you see education and so on. So we're really excited about the diversity of ideas that come to the table, and having a dedicated source of funding to really look at water issues on a watershed scale is really excited for the basin. Next slide, please. said happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Sean? Sorry, I'm cycling through the folks on the call here. One question, Sean, or maybe just a comment would be, it sounds like you're rolling the plan out. Now you're trying to kind of put the dollars in place to start implementing it. I feel from my perspective, it'd be good to have you report back as you kind of formalize that plan and how you're going to maybe allocate resources. And then, as we talked earlier of Longmont's operations may fit into that. Maybe that's a good point where coming back to us and giving more specifics as to how the plan will roll out, and then maybe also specifics as to how Longmont's operations potentially could fit into, meeting some of the goals. I think, at least from my perspective, that'd be a good point maybe to report back to us. I don't know if anybody else has any other kind of comments or questions on that. I don't see any.
This is Sean. We'd be happy to, and if we want to put a placeholder in, the board expects to kind of get through its ideas and thinking around it around maybe as late as February. So if there was an opportunity to be on the agenda in maybe March or April, that might be a good timing.
I'd definitely be in favor of that. Is anybody else have a thought on that? I think that'd be great, just so we could track, given obviously the importance of Longmont in the plan and also the kind of overall, impact potentially to Longmont system. I think that's a good check-in point. So I appreciate that. Anything else, Jason or Sean, or any questions or comments from the board?
No, thank you for the opportunity to present to you. As Kevin said, some of this may be new to some of the board members, and as Jason alluded to earlier, if you want to take a conversation offline, we're happy to talk to you and take as much time as you want to walk through any one of these elements, the stream management plan or the business plan, but happy to present it to you and looking forward to circling back with you in March or April and get further feedback.
Great. Well, thank you, Jason and Sean. Thanks for the presentation today.
Thank you. And thank you for supporting the stream management plan. Those matching funds go a long ways when we're writing grants.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I'll keep moving on here in the agenda. I think we're on item 6, which is agenda revisions and submission of documents. Ken or Wes, Nelson, anything there that we need to be aware of?
I have none.
I have none.
Okay. All right. We'll keep moving. Item 7 is development activity, and it doesn't look, Wes, there's no development activity that we need to review today. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. 8, general business, and the one item we have there is for cash and lieu review.
Yeah, so I'm going to go through with the board just a few of the highlights. So as you've all seen, we are looking at 3 primary criteria for this review. There was a few Lake McIntosh and Oligarchy ditch shares that were transacted in this last quarter at an average cost of $15,100 per acre foot. The cost for new water supplies, we looked at that more specifically. We looked at the Bureau of Reclamation's construction cost index to make an adjustment for that. We noticed that it was less than 1%, 0.7% actually was the difference between quarters. And that was the only real information that we had that was of significant contribution towards this particular criteria. So what you're seeing there is the same or essentially unchanged from the last quarter. On the CBT allocation, there was a total of 54 units that were transacted at an average cost of $73,209 per acre foot. That's a little lower than we saw in the last quarter, where it was just a little over 78,000 an acre foot. So it's down about 5,000 acre foot from last quarter. We had a couple initial transactions are not completed, but in December there was about 60 units that transacted at around 74,000. So this number that we have here, 73,209, seems to be a pretty good finger on the pulse of where that's at. I'll remind Water Board that cash in lieu is currently at $17,683. So pretty close to where we're seeing that cost of new water supply. And then lastly, I'm going to go ahead and make note that of the 54 units that were transacted in this quarter, 21 of those, the buyers were irrigation with an average cost of just over 77,000. So what we're seeing here is, it used to be there was quite a difference between the buyers being developers or irrigators, and now, at least in this quarter, not so much. And so really, I guess the overall theme of this is that there wasn't a whole lot of change from the last quarter. So if there's other questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those for you.
Thanks, Wes. Any questions for Wes on this? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So Wes, if I understand right, we've been setting it to date based on the Windy Gap firming project costs, which is $17,683 per acre foot. And you're saying that's the same as what it was the prior quarter when we set it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then if we were to stay at that same price, do you need a motion to do so, or what do you need from us in terms of setting or keeping that same price?
I don't need a motion. If we can just reflect the minutes that that's the board's determination to leave it where it's at now until the next quarterly review.
Okay. I guess I just open that up for the water board. Any questions or comments on that? That's the way we've set it, obviously. And I think we're going to get into this a little bit later in the Windy Gap firming project update. There's been some pretty major news in terms of ability to move that project forward. And that's the project we've been pegging. The cost of that project is what we've been pegging our cash and lieu to for a number of years now. So I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts or would like to discuss a different cash and lieu price. Otherwise, we'll just leave it where it's at. Feel free to chime in if you have any comments or questions on that. Okay. I don't see anybody objecting to that. So Wes, why don't we go ahead and keep it at the current rate? And then we can monitor that and see if we need to adjust it in future quarters going forward. So
very good.
Great. Thank you. So with that, we're on to item 9, and 9A is a monthly water supply update. Wes?
Yeah, so we wanted to just continue to follow up. Normally we would start giving water board kind of monthly updates. This is at the front end of the kind of the snowpack season, but as you recall, back in October when we talked to the board, we were facing some fires and pretty dry conditions. So we decided that for this month and months upcoming, we would just continue to provide you some information on our overall water supply. And so I've got a short PowerPoint presentation. Basically, it'll go along with the textual information we included in your packet, where I wanted to just highlight a few key parts. And then towards the end of the presentation, Ken will speak a little bit on the fire impacts. And then there again, as always, if you have some questions or anything, we can address those at that time. So I'd like to start with the next slide. So as the board may recall, we continue to operate under the Water Supply and Drought Management Plan, which is for us to be in a sustainable conservation level. That was directed by City Council back in July. So that's where we're at to date. Next slide. Stream flows for almost all of 2020 water year were below average. And this kind of indicates that the solid blue line is what we actually saw. The gray line above it was the average. There were certain periods of time where our stream flow was a third or even a fourth of normal. I think currently we're about half of what we normally would see. That would be kind of that 9 CFS of the 17 CFS average. So continuing to stay a little below normal. Next slide. I know this slide is kind of hard to see, but what we wanted to speak to on this, local storage is slightly below average. So in other words, the 5-year average, if we took about 12.5 reservoirs in our basin, normally at the start of December, we would have those at about 66% full. We actually seen them to be about 62% full. And so slightly below average, but not anything overwhelmingly to concern ourselves. One point is note, as Nelson mentioned, Button Rock is full, which we normally would have seen that being down. However, Union is more down than it normally is. So there's kind of a balancing of the reservoirs. But as a whole, we're slightly below average. Next slide, please. So again, Ralph Price Reservoir being full and spilling. Nelson mentioned about 10 CFS. We're hopeful that we can have our repairs done by the end of February, early March. And I'm not going to steal Jason's thunder when he talks about that more specifically under our item 9D. Next slide. Union Reservoir, again, as I mentioned, and as Nelson did, we were down about 4,500 acre feet. One thing that I'd like to speak to is to fill Union Reservoir, it takes a little bit longer. Union Reservoir is an off-channel reservoir that fills off the Oligarchy ditch. And with just the operational history of that, it normally would take a month or two to fill Union, regardless of how much flow is in the St. Vrain Creek, just from the standpoint of what the Oligarchy can handle. And so it's likely that earlier this year, it could be as early as January, it might be in March or April, but sometime earlier, it's likely that we may be releasing some water out of Button Rock. The value of that is that Button Rock, being an on-channel reservoir, has the ability to store quicker, physically store quicker. We also have more decrees available to store in Button Rock than we do just in Union alone. And so we're going to try to continue to do our best management practice and do some operational things that will hopefully at the end of the runoff season that we can realize Union and Button Rock being full. Next slide, please. So the Longmont water treatment plants are on pace to produce about 104% of what we've seen in 2002. And we kind of use that as a monitor or as a benchmark. That's when we started doing our water supply and drought management plans. So interestingly, over that 19-year period, we're just slightly over it, even though our population has increased. And that's a testament to some of the water conservation as things that the city has done. In comparison, if you kind of hard to see, I understand, but in 2019, we did about 16,000 acre feet. So we're going to do about 2,000 acre feet more than last year. But if you looked at the whole 19-year period, the average was about 17,000. So we're nothing real surprising. I think we're right on track to what we were expecting. Next slide, please. So the snowpack for the South Platte Basin, as Nelson mentioned, we were at 76% of normal, and on the upper Colorado at about 73% of normal. kind of bear in mind that the snowpack this early part of the season is probably barely 0.25% of the snow that we would normally experience. And so with each passing water board review period, it'll become more and more important. I think one thing to note is you can see on that green line how a single event can really make a difference. And so we're hoping that we'll have a couple significant snowpacks, and early on would be nice. But as always, it's those spring storms that will really make or break our water supply. But as of right now, we're below average, but nothing to overly concern ourselves with at this point. Next slide, please. So Pleasant Valley Reservoir, if you were to look specifically at our local storage, you'll note that Pleasant Valley Reservoir is down. It's about 25% of full. And it is the call on the river, as Nelson mentioned. We are putting water in there. Likely it will have realized its full decree by the end of this month. And in so doing, we'll probably be somewhere around 1/3 full. And then we'll have to wait until either the call on the river changes so that it can fill under one of its enlargement decrees, or we can put other water rights that are decreed to go in there. You'll notice back in 2018, when we were doing some work there, we were actually less full than we are now. And in that given year, we ended up filling it to about 80%. So we're thinking, even though it's down quite a bit, that everything indicates that we should be able to get it within 3/4 or even full before the end of the runoff. We'll see how the snowpack does. Next slide, please. So that's kind of on the water supply piece. The other piece that we wanted to speak to was kind of some of the fire impacts, and we wanted to speak to that this month. Now, going forward, there really won't be a whole lot more to say, but we wanted to highlight 5 of the major fires that were in along the Front Range, all of which have now been contained. So when you look at them, you can see there's a fairly significant amount of acreage that was burned. There was just under 450,000 acres represented by these 5 fires. So if you were to kind of rough that out, you're talking an area from Longmont up to Fort Collins and over to Greeley. So a pretty big total area. Fortunately, most of these were outside of the direct watershed, but I think at this point, Ken, I'm going to let Ken go ahead and speak to the kind of the remaining slides and the few that actually may have some contribution in terms of water quality for the St. Vrain.
Thank you, Wes. Did want to kind of bring the board up to speed on where we are with the fires. Most people will read the 100% containment and the fact that most of the fires are out, and kind of it's real easy to kind of forget about it. Unfortunately, all 3 of the fires did and are going to impact us, but that impact will be felt really in the future. I'll really start with the smallest fire. I'll call it small. It's the largest fire ever in Boulder County, but that's the Calwood fire at 10,000 acres. It's still a sizable fire. Next slide, please. So the Calwood fire, this slide is basically what we call an erodibility map. This shows where the little bit larger concern of erodibility is. And there's really 2 factors. The 2 primary factors in erodibility are how hot the fire burned, and then how steep the terrain is where the fire burned. So this map shows if you kind of envision the larger area, it's about the eastern 3/4 of it, you'll see a green area right and kind of just west of the middle. But that whole area is the Gear Canyon area. From that marker there going east, that's Gear Canyon. So the bulk of the fire actually burnt in the left-hand basin, although the left-hand creek does come to Longmont, and so that will impact us eventually as the ash laden and silt come down from that area. Most of that area is Boulder County open space and U.S. Forest Service property. So the one thing I do have to do a little bit of a shout out to the Boulder County open space. They have done a really good job at looking at doing rehab, and they've already turned in a project to the Natural Resources Conservation Service through their Emergency Watershed Protection Program, and they will be doing a lot of work up there on putting down aerial mulch and seeding and really doing a lot of the fire recovery efforts in that area. The area on the west side of the map, basically from that green spot over, that whole area is called the Central Gulch area. The fire started really on the far west side of this burn area in the Calwood Education Center. That's where they got the name Calwood Fire, and then burnt to the east. So that whole area on the west side is Central Gulch. That's all. Central Gulch eventually drains down into the South St. Vrain Creek, and then that drainage would go on down South St. Vrain to the town of Lyons over our diversion structures on the South St. Vrain on into the main stem of the St. Vrain Creek, where the north and south come together in Lyons, and then we'll come on east. So looking at this erodibility map, you can see, and primarily because of the steepness of the terrain, some of the most erodible areas are on Central Gulch. We were initially, and just for information's sake, all these erodibility maps tend to be a little on the high side, just the way it works out. We are certainly hoping that, especially the north part of Central Gulch, burnt very, the burn was much cooler, mostly because it was coming down the canyon, coming down the walls of the South St. Vrain Canyon. And as the fire goes down, it doesn't tend to flare up as much. And so it didn't burn quite as bad. In fact, go ahead and go to the next slide. This is the bottom end of Central Gulch. This is about 3/4 of a mile upstream of the intersection of St. Vrain Creek, South St. Vrain Creek. The fire didn't quite make it down to this point, and the point of this picture was just to kind of show you. You can kind of see the damage from the 2013 flood. The bottom of this valley is fairly open and large rock and cobble from the flood, and but there's good timber on the sides. There is good downfall logs. You go about another 1/4 of a mile and you hit the fire. And luckily at this part of the fire, you actually, if you could have a prescribed burn and have a perfect fire, that's what we had there. It actually burnt the understory, but didn't even get up into the crown of the trees. So you go about another 1/2 a mile before you really get into where the trees were burnt up in the crown. So the good news for us, we were originally very concerned about what was going to happen with Central Gulch. Still concerned. We're still going to watch it. We're still going to work with the county and the U.S. Forest Service to try to get some work done on the upper parts of it. But it appears that at least from a woody debris and hopefully from a sediment load, the effect of the 2013 flood will help keep some of that woody debris or most of it up there, and hopefully a good portion of the granular debris. So really, we will have ash because it will be suspended in the water and it'll be coming down. So we'll have some pretty good ash flows come out of here. But we'll we'll be working with the county and the U.S. Forest Service to get in some rain gauges to get us some advanced warning, and we can shut off water intakes during the worst of the rainstorm events that would bring that down. So that's pretty much kind of right now where we are with the Calwood fire. That since that burned into our basin, that will have the greatest impact. Luckily, it won't have an impact all winter because there won't be major runoff events. It'll really be next late May, June, July, early August, when the big thunderstorm type events come and really flush that canyon out. So then go ahead and go to the next slide. This is the East Troublesome fire. It's probably the most problematic fire we have. It burnt really a good portion of the CBT collection system. And so that's going to be one of the things that we'll have to be watching very, very closely. The good thing is we've already had one good meeting with Northern staff on post-fire recovery efforts. Again, I'll hand it to Northern. They are taking this seriously. They've set up an entire interdisciplinary team that is working on fire recovery. They've set up some operational planning that will help. The good thing about this fire is that it hasn't impacted any water quality yet, and all winter long we'll be bringing over the CBT water. So we'll have the east slope, Carter and Horsetooth, completely full of clean water before any of the summer thunderstorms hit. Of the fire itself, the big part of the fire really was in the Willow Creek. The worst part of the fire was in the Willow Creek Basin, but the Willow Creek Basin only makes up 13% of the CBT system. So that's probably an area where we'll be able to do some shunning of some of the water to keep it out of the system. 25% of the watershed is the Colorado River area, and that's really west and north of Grand Lake, and then east going up into the Rocky Mountain National Park. The fire that went up straight north of Grand Lake up into the Kawanichi Valley part of the park didn't burn too hot. That's mostly open meadow, and I really am cautiously optimistic that a lot of that will green up before some of the big thunderstorms. The more problematic part is North Inlet Creek, which is kind of west or northeast and east of Grand Lake, and then Troublesome Creek, which is the north part of that burn in Rocky Mountain National Park. Those were pretty big fires, pretty hot fires, and those unfortunately drain directly into Grand Lake. So their impacts will be felt right into Grand Lake, and there's not much we can do about that. Can't really change that. And so the good part of the part about the Troublesome drainage is that about half of that burnt in around 2012 in that last drought. So the upper part of that had already burnt, and so it would not have burnt very hot in this fire and should green up and really not create too big of a problem. And another good part of it's an area called Big Meadow, which again that burnt, but that will green up quickly too. Still a lot of area up there, but it's the North Inlet Creek that'll probably be the biggest impact. So that will really impact us a year from now as that impacts the west slope water. And a year from now, when we bring in over that water, we might have some concerns. It did jump the Continental Divide and burn down into the Moraine Park area. But in talking with Northern Water staff, they're fairly confident that that won't impact the CBT system too bad. Part of that had already burnt in the Cub Creek fire, Moraine Park fire, about 8 or 9 years ago. and part of it didn't burn too hot because it was fairly high elevation. The higher your elevation, the less heat you get on your fire generally. So while that did burn a good area, Northern feels less concerned about that. And I'll go ahead to the next slide. This is just a blow up of that Moraine Park area and the Troublesome Gulch area. So that's really the kind of the biggest part. A lot of people working on that at Northern Water, and a lot of people working on it with the Bureau of Reclamation, Grand County. It's amazing the people have come together to start helping out already on the west slope. So we'll keep you updated on that, and that's more of a long-term issue for us. Next slide, please. And I think that was it. So we are keeping an eye on these fires. We'll keep an eye on them. It was a little scary when you think the Calwood fire burnt to within 1.5 miles of the North St. Vrain Basin on the south side. Had it gone less than 1/4 mile more, it would have hit the side of the South St. Vrain Canyon going up north, and it would have climbed right up that canyon and been in the north pretty quick. So that's how close it was to our north drainage on the south. The East Troublesome fire, once it burned over in the Moraine Park area, it actually burnt to within 3 miles of Estes Cone. And the Estes Cone is kind of the north side drains into the Big Thompson, the south side drains in to the North St. Vrain. So we were within 1.5 miles of the Calwood fire, 3 miles of the East Troublesome fire. And then the Calwood fire, when it made its run down south into the Big Thompson, was only 10 miles away from us. So we really had all three of those big fires literally within miles of the North St. Vrain Basin. So we're very fortunate it did not burn into the North St. Vrain at all. And so for Longmont, the best news is we should have good, clean water supply from the North Basin, even if some of these other basins are impacted a little bit. So that's really all I have right now on the fires, but wanted to give you a quick update on them and let you know we will continue to track them and continue to give you input on that.
Thanks, Ken. Does the board have any questions or comments for Wes or Ken on the reports? Roger, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Ken, I don't want to belabor it too long, but two things on my mind. I didn't hear the causes of the starts of these fires. Were they natural or were they man-made, or do you know off the top of your head?
If they know, they haven't said yet. They have not on all three of the fires. They haven't posted a reason. It's possible that they're investigating them, or it's possible they got so big they couldn't figure it out. But it hasn't been a cause that I'm aware of yet on any of them.
One other question then, how much of the burn was helped, I guess, by the amount of dry timber up there, like pine beetle kill? Was that a big factor at all? I know in Grand Lake there seemed to be a lot of that available to burn, but I don't know.
You know, the dry timber made it easy for it to burn, but quite honestly, the drought this summer, how dry it was, the low, extremely low soil moisture and extremely low humidity, creating extremely dry timber, even the live timber, extremely dry. And then unfortunately, pretty thick timber everywhere, and the winds. It was really the wind, some really terrible wind conditions that every time they came close to getting it corralled, the wind took it off and made it run. And so, you know, we had similar big fires in 2012, the last drought, bigger drought, as well as 2002. If you go back to, you know, it's usually during these drought periods that we have the big fires.
Okay, thanks, Ken.
Any other, Allison, you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you. I had two questions. One is involving snowpack and soil moisture. Is the snowpack to some degree going to replenish the soil moisture such that we're going to realize even less down here?
Yeah, in fact, I would say, with the soil moisture conditions we're looking at right now, were extremely dry before it started to snow. It would, even if we had 100% snowpack, we'd be lucky to have a 75% runoff. I'll let Wes elaborate, but it will impact it.
Yeah, I think, and that's where sometimes these early snows help a little bit in that they come out slower. If we have just those late spring snows, it's melting so fast that the ground can only absorb so much. And so it's going to be a combination of things, but Ken hit it on the head. It's going to take an above average snowpack to be able to realize an average runoff, I think.
Thank you. And second question was kind of circling back to your presentation, Wes. I was wondering, this is kind of an elementary question, but what actually happens to the water post-treatment plant?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
What happens to the effluent once it's fully treated?
So what we do is there's really two types of water that the water treatment takes, either fully consumable or single use. For the single use water that goes into the plants, that is just returned down to St. Vrain Creek at the wastewater treatment plant, and it'd be available for the next users in priority. For the fully consumable effluent that goes through the water treatment plant, we lease that either through long-term or short-term leases. And so there's approximately a dozen entities that we have lease arrangements with. And so we use nearly 100% of the wastewater treatment effluent. And we find that in most cases, that's insufficient to satisfy the full lease requirements, thus why we've been making releases out of Union Reservoir to make up the difference. So in the winter time, we usually have closer to 90 to 100% of the effluent that's available to us is fully consumable. And that's because we're taking water out of storage, out of Button Rock, that would have already been fully consumable water that was stored. And so we're able to make more complete use of the water in the wintertime, but nonetheless, that total amount that's being released from the wastewater treatment plant effluent is normally, again, not sufficient to meet our full lease obligations. And so there's always some that we're either releasing as in-stream credits through St. Vrain Creek or out of Union to fully satisfy those obligations.
Thank you. And one follow-up question. What kind of percentages does it shake out in terms of fully consumable versus single use in the irrigation season?
So it varies by month, but if we were to look at the irrigation season, I would say during the irrigation season, we're probably a third or a half that would be available as reusable effluent. It really depends on the call on the river and what water rights we have available to us. It also depends upon what the water treatment plant is using. We CBT being single use, but Windy Gap being fully consumable. And so we usually try to manage those trans basin supplies that we take into the water treatment plant, the CBT and the Windy Gap. We like to run Windy Gap when we have a higher return flow credit factor. So oftentimes we'll run that Windy Gap earlier in the season to get more full and complete use. We do have the ability, though, if there ever becomes a time when the wastewater treatment plant effluent is above and beyond what our needs are, we can put that excess into Union Reservoir. We can pump that into Union, and sometimes we have done that.
Thank you.
There any other questions or comments for Ken or Wes? I do have one. Ken, you had mentioned that under the Calwood fire, you guys are looking at putting maybe rain monitors up to look and see if there's ash flows coming down. I assume then you turn off the diversion from the South St. Vrain. I know Fort Collins has done something similar where they look at turbidity or that in the Poudre River. I guess is the intent that you'd have more? Are you going to be monitoring the rain gauges and then looking in the river, or is there ability to put some sort of gauge, in the river to kind of monitor turbidity and then turn off your diversions based upon, if it gets too high, it may cause more of an issue to the treatment plant? Just kind of curious how you're going to handle that going into this year.
Yes, that's correct, Todd. We really want the rain gauges to give us the maximum forewarning. But really all that does is say, hey, it rained up here. And then we would have to use both visual and turbidity monitoring to determine when we would shut off. If it gets to be a very significant rainstorm event, it will just automatically shut it off because we know what it's going to do. But if it's a quarter inch or a half inch, then we'd probably do it with turbidity monitoring. But our plants they do real-time turbidity monitoring of all their sources.
Okay. Thanks, Ken. Any other questions, comments? Scott?
Thank you. Just a quick one, and I don't know if anybody has a definitive answer, but I think at a recent meeting where Brad Wynn was speaking, he mentioned that the Northern Board may not issue their quota for the 2021 season at its April meeting, which is when we've historically seen that information. That might be postponed into later into the summer, maybe May or June. And I didn't know if that affects our ability to project our water supply, water demand considerations, or if that's going to inconvenience us a fair amount.
Yeah, I haven't heard definitively that they were going to postpone it. I did hear they were considering, or they just didn't mention. They said we're not sure when we'll do that. I'd be surprised if they went clear into June, because that really has more of an impact. That has a big impact on the irrigation companies. They need to know how much water they're going to have. But yeah, for us, it would be less than convenient if it were too late. But
and I might add that where we'll really use that information is when we put together our, the next year's water supply and drought management plan. What it would probably require us is to then make some assumptions instead of the facts. One of the tools one of the primary reasons they've always tried to get it out when they normally do is so that people can make some decisions in regards to taking any of the carryover water. I think Longmont, as we as water resources staff have already kind of come to a conclusion that we're going to take our full entitlement of our carryover. So with that in mind, it's not going to be probably as much so that we have to wait for the final determination. And our decision to take that carryover, there's a lot of factors that's going to go into that. Some of that being the uncertainty of the water quality that we may or may not experience here in the native basin water rights. And two, when I talked about some of the storage that we have, we've always tried to have a play it on the safe side, if you will, and to be as much certain as possible that we have enough water. And so I think with those things in mind, it would be more helpful if they could get it out. But if they were to wait a month or so, I think Longmont would still be able to come up with a reasonable assumption and still be able to put its water supply and drought management plan together at about the same time that we normally would have otherwise.
I guess one comment, there has not been any definitive discussion or direction on that other than Brad's saying it may need to be considered from the board level, just so everybody's aware of that. So I think that'll be a discussion as we get further into the spring, just so there hasn't been anything definitively decided there. Any other questions, comments from the board? I don't see any. Okay. With that, we'll go on to item 9B, which is a Windy Gap firming project update. Ken?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a real quick update today on Windy Gap. Hopefully everybody received their email, the good news that the federal lawsuit was finally got an order out and was great news. We won every single point in the case, and the judge upheld the issuance of the permit by the federal agencies. That really helps the project start to feel like it can move forward. Obviously, there's a potential for an appeal that is not all that uncommon in a federal lawsuit like this. The plaintiffs have, I believe, 60 days from the time that the order was out, so that time won't run out till February, about February 10th. But so we little bit of a waiting pattern here still yet. That being said, one of the things the project needs to move forward with is relocation of the WAPA power lines by the Western Area Power Administration, and they are actually going to start working on that. They were waiting for a ruling, and they don't appear to be needing to wait to see if it's appealed or not. They're going to start working on that project hopefully right away. Of course, it is the middle of winter, so we'll see how that works, but that does allow that to start moving forward. So as a result, the project is actually calling for a special participants meeting this Wednesday to talk with all of the participants and let everyone weigh in on their opinion of if anything moves forward, or if we wait until the end of the appeal period, and really where we go with the project right now. Still, I mean, the project isn't ready to kick off anyway, because still need to get all the funding in place before it can kick off. But the timing of that funding, the timing of the sales of bonds and things like that will really try to work that out in the next month or two. As far as the project itself, the Colorado River connectivity channel design is now at a 40% design state, so that's good. Getting that project moving forward. The firming project itself, they've done an inspection on the Bald Mountain Tunnel and the potential interconnect to the reservoir from the CBT system, and that all looked good. So that news is good. Critter Valley REA will start putting in project power lines. I think they actually should have started by now. And then the draft air quality permit from the state of Colorado should be coming to us within a few weeks. So that was one of the last permits that needed. It's not that it won't happen, it's just what it says. That should be coming fairly quickly. So just a little bit more of a wait, I guess, on the appeal period, but I think the project had a great milestone and should be starting to move forward. So happy to answer any questions on that if there were any.
Thanks, Ken. Any questions for Ken on Windy Gap update? I'm not seeing any. With that, we'll move on to item 9C, the monthly legislative report. Ken, it has you down again.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't have a report this month yet. Obviously, this legislative session won't start till next month. And I don't have the information from the interim legislative committee yet. I apologize for not being able to get that to you yet today, but we'll cover all that next month at the January meeting and go over that.
Sounds good. Yeah, it's on the items for tentatively scheduled future board meetings, so we can revisit that in January. So with that, we'll move on to item 9D, the water resource engineering project update. And looks like we have an elf here named Jason that can fill us in. Go ahead.
Hey, Merry Christmas, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Jason Elkins, water resource engineer and project engineer for all of our capital projects. I got 3 big projects I want to update you on, but real quick, I just wanted to add to kind of, you had asked about the turbidity testing. We've actually started taking some turbidity, some water quality samples and doing some analysis to try to figure out what the baseline turbidity and total suspended solids is in the South St. Vrain. CDOT's got a project that's coming up this summer, and they think that, you know, they might impact that. And with the Cowwood fire, we just thought we'd take it upon ourselves. Let's just go ahead and just start doing some water quality analysis. So our water quality lab and our Nelson Flander water treatment plant operators are doing water quality analysis on that, so we can get a good baseline prior to spring runoff and all the debris coming down our way. Let's talk about button rock repairs. So as you might recall, we sprung a leak over the summer up at Button Rock, and we currently have the emergency gate closed, and we have the regulating gate completely torn apart. We're currently actively trying to get these repairs done so that we can put this all back together and have it up and operating come the middle of February. There's quite a bit of repairs. It's pretty extensive, but it's fully achievable. We're totally confident that we can do it. You know, there's just a couple things that add some time to it. Lead-based paint, you know, so it's like we got to properly dispose of that. That takes time. But I think we're going to have Button Rock put back together and back into service the second week of February. That's what we're tentatively scheduled for. The South St. Vrain pipeline pump station. So I'm actually meeting with the town of Lyons tonight to try to secure our permanent easement to install the pump station just south of the Lyons Fire Protection District. If you're familiar with the town of Lyons, right just south of the Fire Protection District is a vacant lot where our South St. Vrain pipeline runs through. So working with them to get an easement big enough for us to install that, and I fully anticipate that they're going to approve it tonight. The design for that, we're currently getting ready to advertise an RFP, request for proposal, for a pump station manufacturer. So we're looking to, we already have Burns and McDonnell on board as our engineer consultants, but we're going to have a prefabricated manufacturer come on board to start the design and the design and the fabrication of that, to have that delivered come June. So anyway, should be going out to bid by the end of this week, and hopefully by the end of January we'll know who's going to be making the pump station. As for the South St. Vrain pipeline rehab project, unfortunately that's hit a bit of a delay. I don't know if you guys recall a couple of weeks ago that there was a couple up in Gilpin County that had died from carbon monoxide poisoning. It was, I don't know the details, but it sounds like it was some sort of accident or something. So anyway, one of those two people was the project manager at CNL Water Solutions, who was in charge of our project. And so she passed away. She's one of their founding project managers. So it's been pretty hard for CNL. I told them, take as much time as they need. I get it. You lost a family member just as much as you did a coworker. So I'm anticipating that's going to put about a 1 month delay on that. But with the pump station project starting construction in June, it's really inconsequential. It would be nice to get the South St. Vrain pipeline up and running prior to the pump station so we can, put it back into service and at least, do some testing, some flow testing and stuff on that. But if we don't make that, it's just going to end up delaying it, a few months. So it's unfortunate and it's sad. But it's, we'll work through it and we'll make up the lost time, and we'll get the South St. Vrain. I fully plan on having that thing back up and running 100% by the end of next year. Any questions?
Any questions for Jason? I am not seeing any. Great. Thank you for the report, Jason.
No problem.
Okay, we're on to 9E, which is a water conservation sustainability update. Is Francie out there?
Yes, hope everyone's doing well today. I have an update on 4 different water conservation items from this past fall. The board may remember that this past summer, you all provided feedback on the Climate Action Task Force water conservation recommendation. City staff reviewed board feedback combined with an analysis process to provide a implementation timeline and modifications on all Climate Action Task Force recommendations. They were passed earlier in December, so the water conservation recommendation, which originally had the goal of a 35 to 40% reduction by 2025, staff modified that goal to instead, similar to what Water Board recommended, continue with current water conservation and drought management plans until the 2024 Water Efficiency Master Plan update, where a more extensive analysis of the benefits of a more ambitious water conservation goal should be analyzed and returned to City Council at that time. So that effort essentially has been put on not put on hold, because we'll still continue water conservation and drought management efforts, but this analysis of a more ambitious water conservation goal probably won't begin until sometime in 2023. Another update is that this past September, staff from a number of different divisions, including planning, parks, water resources, attended the Growing Water Smart workshop from the Sonoran Institute. From that, we created an action plan focused on how to better integrate water efficiency and land use planning to meet the goals of our water efficiency master plan and envision Longmont. So that it's a 1 year action plan. Staff is currently in the process of presenting it to different leadership among the city, but the primary goal was to figure out how the city staff can further integrate water efficiency into the development process. So staff will be meeting monthly to kind of update and make sure that water conservation is continue to be integrated into other parts of the city more so than it has in the past. I do want to highlight that we did find while going to that workshop, Longmont actually is a little bit ahead of other communities in kind of connecting planning and water resources, primarily because our water utility and planning are within the city, but we did identify areas that we can continue to improve. Another opportunity that we actually just applied to is the Water Now Accelerator. It's a project accelerator. We just applied earlier this month, and we applied to get some best practices research support, because a lot of our AMR data will be coming in hopefully by the end of the first quarter next year, because we'll have a lot of the the system set up to receive that data. So we wanted to have some best practice research from experts in the water conservation field of how to best use that data. So we will hopefully find out, I think, next month whether we received that project accelerator support. So I'll update the board if that is the case. And then lastly, we partner with Resource Central every year for a number of water conservation programs. And next year we will be the first community to launch a income qualified garden in a box program. So if you're familiar with Garden in a Box, cities usually partner to provide a $25 discount. We had been hearing that that's not accessible for all of our residents. So those who participate in Longmont Cares, which is a income qualified program, can now also participate in a 80% discount on a Garden in a Box. And we're hoping that will help reach more members of our community with those water-wise gardens. So those are 4 very different updates on things happening with water conservation. But are there any questions?
Thanks, Francie. Any questions that the board has on the updates to the conservation plans? Francie, I do have one. I think it'd be the growing water smart. I don't know at some point in the future if it makes sense to make another kind of specific presentation on that. I'd be kind of interested in seeing how you're integrating kind of water resource, water conservation with future development. And part of that may be as we look to the future water demands and the build out for the city of Longmont, maybe we can get some more indication as to, what is that appropriate or achievable level of conservation so that we can, kind of look at water supply and demand and kind of get a better idea of, where are we in terms of meeting that future demand. Anyway, I know Northern was kind of help facilitating some of those presentations. I think that's a great program and glad to see that Longmont participated. But is that something you could report back to us on at a future meeting?
Yes, that is something we could report back. It also sounds like I just want to make sure I heard your request correctly. Besides understanding maybe the different components of the action plan and how we're trying to a lot of the efforts we found were on how we better educate developers, but also kind of bring back how we're meeting water demand and water supply, which I assume would be more of a conversation presented by Ken.
Yeah, Francie, I guess what I'm curious of is, one of the things as I understand it would be there may be ways to, do, less bluegrass, more xeric, really reduce those future landscape demands in certain areas that would have a corresponding reduction in future water demands. So, and I don't know if you guys got into that or how that kind of with the cost of water, what I'm seeing is a lot of developers are trying to figure out ways they can reduce their cost of development. And one way to do that is to do more kind of low water use plants or landscaping. And I don't know, that's kind of what I was curious. I don't know if that's being integrated into the planning documents. And then that would have a corresponding impact on, the future water demand. So it may be one that may take a little bit of time before that all kind of flushes out of how it would be integrated into the future kind of planning documents. And then what those changes would mean in terms of future reductions in water demand, if that makes sense. That's kind of what I'm kind of curious of going forward.
Yes, that does help clarify. In the time we had, we didn't get into that level of detail. I think a lot of the initial conversations were around engagement. That being said, I think that's where we'll start to move towards. So as you mentioned, it might be a little bit longer for us to return with that presentation, but I think we'll start to move in that direction. And I also know we don't have a set timeline yet, but hopefully in the probably starting next fall, but maybe a little, and then over the next 2 years, the sustainability plan and Vision Longmont will begin their update. So we'll also be looking into how we can set up this growing water smart effort to kind of maybe more strongly integrate into those plans. So I think later in the year, we should have some more information that we can return and present to the board on.
That sounds great. No rush. I just think it'd be something that would be important for us to pay attention to. And like you say, then we could maybe integrate it into the sustainability goals that the city has, long term, just make sure we're tracking with the water supply planning. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Any other questions, comments for Francie here? Scott, you have one?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, it's not for Francie. I apologize for any inconvenience, but I had a 4:30 appointment scheduled upon me, so I'm going to have to excuse myself and check back with you all next month.
Sounds good. Well, Merry Christmas, Scott.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy holidays. Thank you.
Good one. See ya.
Okay, with that, we're through the items from staff. We're on to the items from board. Item 10A is a review of major project listings and items tentatively scheduled for future board meetings. The only one I really saw on there for January is, once again, to discuss the water legislation in more detail. Is there anything else, Ken, that you see coming up that we need to be thinking about?
Nothing that we really haven't already been discussing.
Okay. All right. With that, we're on to informational items and water board correspondence. Is there anything that the board wants to bring up at this point for the consideration or discussion? And I'm not seeing anything. So with that, we're on to items tentatively scheduled for future board meetings. Once again, the legislative update, and then in March, we'll revisit the cash in lieu. And I think that is it. Is there anything anybody else wants to add for the last board meeting of the year here? I don't see anything. So with that, I just, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting and wish everybody a Merry Christmas and look forward to 2021. Hopefully we can see everybody in person and get back to more of a normal meeting.
Yes.
So it'd be good to meet Allison and the other board members in person beyond Zoom.
Yeah.
So I look forward to that.
Just one item of note, our next meeting will be January the 25th. So we're going to delay it 1 week due to the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday in January. So we'll see you on January 25th, y'all.
Happy holidays.
Happy
holidays.
holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.